Good afternoon, guys. Today we are going to see about cohort study. I think the last classes we have learned about what is epidemiology, what are the types of disease we have. Sorry, what are the type of study designs we have under epidemiology. Right? So to recap, epidemiology is a study of distribution and determinant of health-related states or events, and its application of this knowledge to control the disease in a certain specified populations. Okay, so we are going to use the knowledge to control the disease, right? So that is the thing about epidemiology. So we have different types of study designs in epidemiology. One is observational and another one is analytical studies. Observation study, we are going to observe what are the events which is happening in the community. We are going to describe it. Okay, so descriptive studies. An analytical study, we are going to analyze what is the relation between a factor and the event. Right? Suppose a risk factor of smoking, how much it is getting related with a disease that is cancer. So these are analytical studies. Analytical study basically it can be we have case control study and cohort study mainly. Okay, and RCT, randomized control trial, is a different experimental study. We'll look about it in next classes. Okay, so case control study, we have seen it in the last class, right? We will be having a case, we'll be comparing with the control. So that is case control study. Case means the persons, the subjects which are having the disease, and controls the subjects which don't have the disease, but all other things are getting common. They will be sharing the common characteristics other than the disease. Okay, so main difference between case control and cohort is nothing but case control study is a retrospective study, right? After the disease has occurred, we are going to elicit the risk factors by taking the history. So that is case control study. And whereas in cohort study, yeah, as the name suggests, cohort means nothing but a group of people, right? We are going to follow a group of people who are sharing a common characteristics. So that is nothing but cohort, right? It depends upon the study factor. The period of follow-up will be differs. So basically, cohort study is prospective study without any suffix or prefix. If they are going to ask what is the retrospective study means, that is only case control study, and prospective study, that means only cohort study. Right? Yes, of course, there is different types of studies in cohort studies, and one among them is retrospective cohort studies also there. But blindly, if they are asking to name some prospective study means, you have to label it as cohort study, right? Okay, so today let's see about cohort study. So cohort. Yeah, what do you mean by cohort? A group of people who share a common characteristics or experience within a defined time period. That is age, occupation, exposure to a drug or vaccine, pregnancy, injured persons, etc. So it is nothing but a group of people who share a common characteristics or experience within a defined period of time. Okay, so you can label it as the children's born at 2021 from January to December. All these kids can be called as a cohort of 2021. Right? Similarly, cohort of 2015 batch, the admission, the students who got admitted on 2015, they can be called as cohort of 2015, because all these students have common characteristic of getting admission on 2015, something like that. Okay. Similarly, we can relate it with a group of people who are receiving the drug, who are receiving the vaccines, and who got pregnancy during the particular time. Okay, so cohort is nothing but a group of people who shares a common characteristics or experience within the defined period of time. Right? Clear? So what are the distinguishing features about cohort studies? So whenever you are going to read with cohort study, try to correlate with case control study, compare with case control study. That will be easier way to remember both the study designs. Okay, cohorts are identified prior to the appearance of the disease under investigations. So here, what we are going to do is we are identified. Subjects, that means cohorts. Cohorts are identified prior to the appearance of the disease under investigations. The disease has not yet occurred among the subjects. Okay, whereas in case control study, the disease has been occurred already. Then only we will be categorizing them as cases and control. In cohort where the disease has not yet occurred among the subjects. Okay, cohorts are identified prior to the appearance of the disease under investigation. The study groups are observed over a period of time to determine the frequency of disease among them. The study groups are observed, okay, followed up for a period of time to determine the frequency of disease among them. So in case control study, we'll be looking back, like we'll by taking histories, we'll be identifying the risk factors by taking either by interview or questionnaires, whatever it is. We'll be asking the history. Whereas in cohort study, the study groups are observed or followed up for a duration of time, determine frequency of disease among the study subjects. Okay, the study proceeds forward from causes to effect. In cohort study, exposed to a risk factor, follow for a duration of time, then the disease occurred. So from cause to effect. Whereas in case control study, effect has already happened. CA lung, the patient has already diagnosed as CA lung. Then we are looking back forward for a risk factor of smoking, right? So this is forward, and case control study is a backward, retrospective, and this is a prospective. Right? So indication of cohort study. When there is a good evidence of an association between exposure and the disease as derived from clinical observations supported by descriptive and case control study. So here, we are spending a lot of time to follow a subjects, right? We'll be spending around 1 year, 3 years, or sometimes even 20 years. Cohort studies are also been reported. Okay, so this is a huge duration, and the amount we are spending, the whatever it is, manpower, material power, or money power, whatever it is, it's quite big, large when compared with other strategies. Okay, so we cannot abuse these resources and all. So if you have a strong evidence based on clinical observation or by descriptive method and case control study, if the study factors has been already described, already explained by these study designs, then only you can go for a cohort study. You cannot directly enter into a cohort study without having a basic evidence. Okay, when there is a good evidence of an association between the exposure and the disease as derived from clinical observation and supported by descriptive and case control study. Okay, first of all, we need to do a descriptive study to get an hypothesis. Right? After getting an hypothesis, we need to prove whether it is true or not. Right? After that, you need to find out the strength of association. By doing case control study, it's easy to conduct a case control study. Okay, we need very minimal number of cases and controls. We can match them and we can identify what is the risk of developing the disease with a particular risk factors. Okay, so after identifying this strength of association, then you can go for a cohort study to confirm it. Okay, so we can follow a period of smokers for a duration of 10 years or 20 years to find out what is the rate of lung cancer among the smokers when compared with non-smokers, something like that. Okay, when there is a good evidence of an association between exposure and the disease as derived from clinical observation and supported by descriptive and case control studies. First indication. Second, when exposure is rare, but the incidence of disease high among exposed, example, industries and X-ray, etc. So when the exposure is rare, but the diseases are more common among the exposed persons. If it is something like that, we can go for a what study. Okay, so examples, industries, radiational places like X-rays and radiology departments. So there the exposure is very exposure is rare, but the incidence of disease among exposed is more when compared with non-exposed. Okay. Third point, when attrition of study population can be minimized. So attrition is a big issue in cohort study as well as in RCT. Okay, during follow-up, if you are lost to follow-up, there is a problem in your result validity and generalizability of your result. If you are not able to control this attritional problem, there will be a big issue when you are submitting your result. So when attrition of study population can be minimized, if you can assure that you can minimize the attrition issues, whatever it is, while planning or when you are going to analyze it, you should have a proper protocol to have this, to deal with these attritional issues. Okay, when the ample of funds are available, as I said before, we should have a ample of fund, because the duration of design is very long period in years. So you should have a ample of funds. We cannot start a study design and we cannot withhold it just because of lack of fund. Okay, so you should have an ample of funds. So what are the criteria? What are the indications of cohort study? When there is a good evidence of an association between exposure and the disease as derived from clinical observations and supported by descriptive and case control studies. An exposure is rare, but the incidence of disease high among exposed like industries and X-rays, etc. When attrition of study population can be minimized, stable and easily accessible cohort, and ample of funds are available. Okay. So now comes to types of cohort study. Prospective cohort study. Next one is retrospective cohort study, and last one is a combination of retrospective and prospective cohort study. Okay. So prospective cohort study is a current cohort study. Prospective is obviously prospective cohort study. The outcome has not yet occurred at the time of investigation begins. Example, Framingham heart disease, US Public Health Services, Dolan Hill study on smoking and lung cancer, etc. These are the examples. You can look into a PAR book to read about what is study factors and what are the things they did during their investigations. Okay, so what they did here, they identified a cohort and they followed up those studies subjects for a duration of time, and they find out what is the rate of disease among exposed as well as among non-exposed. By comparing them, they will come to one conclusion. So this is prospective cohort study. And retrospective cohort study, that is historical cohort study. It's more or less similar to case control study, but still just look into it. The outcomes have all occurred before the start of investigation. So disease has already occurred. We have not yet started. Okay. The investigator goes back in time to select his study group from existing record of past employment, medical records, and traces them forward through the time, usually up to the present. So here, what is the difference? So we should have a document, recorded document. Suppose, for example, 2010, if a person have a medical master health checkup history, okay, from that every 10 years he used to get a master health checkup. So every 10 years we have a checkup record. Okay, if you have this record, you can go back after the diseases occurred. Not like prospective cohort study. You can do as a retrospective study also, provided if you have a proper record in the past. Very clear? The outcomes have all occurred before the start of the investigations. Okay, just like a case control study. The investigator goes back in time to select his study groups from existing record of past employment, medical records, and traces them forward through the time, usually up to the present. Right? This is retrospective cohort study. So retrospective cohort studies are most suitable for occupational disease. Okay. Example, role of arsenic in human carcinogenesis, study of relation between PVC and angiosarcoma of the liver, effect of electronic fetal monitoring during labor. Retrospective cohort study are more economical and produce the results quicker than a prospective cohort study, because it's a kind of record based studies. We don't need to waste money on follow up. Okay. The third one is a combination of retrospective and prospective cohort study. A cohort is identified from a past record. Okay, it's combination of both things. Okay, the cohort is identified from a past record and is assessed of date for the outcome, and the same cohort is followed up prospectively into a future for further assessment of outcome. Suppose, for example, 2010. A person has been identified. I mean, a person has a pre-placement examination record. Okay, he has been worked with the department for a duration of 10 years and still continues. Okay, so at 2020 we are examining him and we have another record, and then again we are following up for a duration of another 10 years. Okay, for the occurrence of any other disease in that particular occupational environment. Okay, so here what we are going to do is, like, we are doing a retrospective cohort study. We started the study with the help of record. and we followed up for duration till present, and then again we are following the same person for a duration of another 10 years or for a duration of another 2 years or 5 years, whatever it is. So here we are combining both the retrospective and prospective. So that is a third type of cohort study, combination of retrospective and prospective cohort study. A cohort is identified from past records and is assessed of date for the outcome, and the same cohort is followed up prospectively into a future for further assessment of outcome. Example, Code Brown and all on radiations. Okay. Next comes to our steps in cohort study. That means elements of cohort study. Okay. First one, selection of study subjects. The second, obtaining data on exposure. And third, selection of comparison group. Fourth, follow-up. Fifth, analysis. Okay. Okay. So first one, selection of study subjects. It can be from a general populations or from a special groups, that is selected groups or exposure group. If it is in a general population, mainly environmental related factors, if you want to study environmental related factors, we can go with the general populations. Yeah, populations are the community people who are residing at a particular area or a village, whatever it is. Okay, that is general population. Special groups, like selected group of pregnancy women, all pregnancy women, or the exposure groups, like people who are working in a radiology department, or the persons who are working with a rice mill, or persons who are getting exposed to a particular factors compared with non-others. Okay, so general population, and second one is select special groups. Special groups includes selected populations, or the or the people who got exposed to a particular exposure. Okay, so this is regarding selection of study subjects. Obtaining data on exposure by doing interviews, questionnaires, review of records, medical examination, or by doing a special test, or by environmental survey. Based on your objectives, and you can select one among the methods to obtain the exposure data, right? And fourth one, selection of comparison group. First one, internal comparisons. You are comparing within the group, right? Suppose a group of people in a department of radiology has been followed up for a duration of 5 years, right? So among these group, we are comparing with male and female within the group itself. Okay, so that is internal comparisons. External comparisons, people who are working in a radiology department has been compared with the people who are working in a medicine or a dental department, something like that. This is external comparisons. Or sometimes with general populations, people who are working in a hospital environment, people who are working in a non-hospital environment, or with the general population. So by comparing these things, we can able to make some data. Okay, so main point in epidemiology is, we need to compare with other people so that we can able to identify what is the problem and what is the answer for that particular research questions. So selection of comparison group, it may be a internal comparisons, or it can be external comparisons, or comparison with the general population rates, right? Then follow must be a regular and in a regular interval, and it has to be followed strictly. Last one, analysis. In terms of incidence rate of outcomes among exposed and non-exposed. So analysis, main thing is incidence. Cohort studies are otherwise known as incidence study. If you want to calculate prevalence, you need to do a cross-sectional study. If you want to calculate incidence, you have to do a cohort study, right? So main thing is incidence rate of outcome among exposed and non-exposed. Second thing, estimation of risk. What is the risk factors, right? So I'm repeating again, what are the steps in cohort study? Selection of study subjects from a general population or from a special group. That is selected group or the exposed groups. Obtaining data on exposure by doing interviews or by using questionnaires, reviewing of records, medical examinations or special tests, and environmental surveys. Selection of comparison groups, it can be internal comparisons or external comparisons or with the general population. Follow analysis in terms of incidence and risk. Okay, so how to calculate incidence? So here there is an example here. Can determine incidence rate directly from the image. Incidence rate can be determined directly in those exposed and those not exposed. Okay, so here you can see a tabular column 2 into 2 tabular column which shows a smoking relation of smoking and the lung cancer. So A is nothing but the smokers who developed the disease, lung cancer, and B is smokers who didn't develop the disease, and C is those who are not having the smoking habit develop the disease, and D is nothing but non-smokers as well as non-deceased. Okay, so A, B, C. The incidence among smoker is nothing but A divided by A plus B, right? Among the smokers, how many has been diagnosed with lung cancer? That is incidence, incidence of lung cancer among the smokers. That is A divided by A plus B. Incidence rate among non-smokers is nothing but C divided by C plus D. Okay, so lung cancer who are not having the disease divided by non-smokers with non-lung. Okay, so A C divided by C plus D here. So here what you are getting is like, among the smokers 10 per thousand, whereas among non-smokers the incidence rate is 1 per thousand. Okay, and it is statistically significant. An estimation of risk. There are two or three types of risk are there: relative risk, attributable risk, and population attributable risk. Okay, so what is relative risk? There is nothing but a risk ratio, the ratio of the incidence of disease or death among exposed and the incidence among non-exposed. The ratio of the incidence of the disease or the death among exposed and the incidence among non-exposed. It is direct measures of direct measure or index of the strength of association between the suspected cause and effect. Okay, it is a method of strength of association. Relative risk is equal to incidence of disease or death among exposed divided by incidence of disease or death among non-exposed. This is the formula for relative risk. Again, I'm repeating: relative risk is equal to incidence of death or disease among the exposed population divided by incidence of disease or death among non-exposed people. Okay. In previous example, as we have seen, incidence rate among smokers was 70 divided by 7,000. Okay, 10 per thousand. Incidence rate among non-smokers 3 divided by 3,000, that is 1 per thousand. Hence, relative risk of lung cancer is nothing but 10 divided by 1 is equal to 10. It implies that smokers are 10 times at great risk of developing lung cancer than non-smokers. So, what is the interpretation of relative risk? It's nothing but just like an odds ratio. Okay, it implies that smokers are 10 times at greater risk of developing lung cancer than non-smokers. Am I clear? Relative risk. Okay. Then comes to a attributable risk, that is risk difference. So difference in the incidence rate of disease or death between an exposed group and non-exposed group is nothing but attributable risk. How much the factor is attributing to the disease. To indicate to what extent the disease under study can be attributed to the exposure. Okay, it indicates to what extent the disease under study can be attributed to the exposure. Here is nothing but incidence of disease rate among exposed minus incidence of disease rate among non-exposed divided by incidence rate among exposed into 100. Okay, so IE minus I0 divided by IE. IE is nothing but incidence among exposed. I0 is nothing but incidence among non-exposed. IE minus IO divided by IE into 100. Okay. So IE incidence among exposed nothing but 10. Okay. 10 minus 1 divided by 10 into 100 is equal to 90%. In this example given, the result indicates that the association between smoking and lung cancer is casual. 90% of the lung cancer among smokers was due to their habit of smoking. So 90% of the disease are related with the smoking habit. Okay, so it's like, if you are going to cut short that smoking habit, you can reduce 90% of lung cancer among the same community. Am I clear? Attributable risk is nothing but how much the factor is attributing to the disease or the factor. Okay, in this example, I'm repeating again, the association between the smoking and lung cancer is causal, and 90% of the lung cancer among smokers was due to their habit of smoking. This is nothing but attributable risk. Then comes to population attributable risk. It is the incidence of disease or death in the total population minus the incidence of disease among those who are not exposed to the suspected causal factor. It provides an estimate of the amount by which the disease could be reduced in that population if a suspected factor was eliminated or modified. So population attributable risk is nothing but total incidence minus incidence in unexposed. Okay, A plus C divided by A plus B plus C plus D minus C divided by C plus D. Okay, so lung cancer among smokers and non-smokers, death per 1 lakh person year. Okay, heavy smoker 64, factors suspected to be exposed to suspected factor, that is A. Non-smokers are 10, non-exposed to suspected causal factor, these are B. Death in total population, that is 74, C. Individual relative risk is A divided by B, that is equal to 6.4. Whereas population attributable risk is nothing but C minus B by C into 100, gives about 86%. Okay. So here is an formula PAR, that is nothing but population attributable risk. PE is equal to number of person exposed. PT is total population. IE is incidence rate among exposed. IU is incidence rate among unexposed. IT is incidence rate among total population. Okay. So PE into IE minus IU into 100 divided by PT into IT. Okay. So next comes to advantages of cohort study. Incidence can be calculated. Main thing, from the cohort study we can calculate incidence rate. Second one, several possible outcomes related to exposure can be studied simultaneously. In case control study, we can able to find out several risk factors for one disease. Here you can what you're going to see is like several risk factor, several possible outcomes for a single risk factor. Okay, several possible outcomes, like for a smoking, what are the disease, or what are the diseases are related with a single factor, that is smoking, right? So this is opposite to a case control study. Like in case control study, we can able to find out what are the risk factors for CL lung. Okay, it can be a case, it can be a smoking, or it can be alcohol, it can be stress, or whatever, genetic, whatever it is. So risk factors are more, we can able to study more risk factors in case control study, whereas we can able to study more outcomes for a particular risk factors in cohort study. Okay, so provide direct estimation of relative risk. It will provide a direct estimation of relative risk, whereas in case control study we can able to identify odds ratio. Dose response ratio can also be calculated in cohort study. Since the comparison groups are formed before the disease developed, certain forms of bias can be minimized, like misclassification of individuals into exposed and non-exposed. So we can able to have a less biased study. Okay, case control study is famous for its bias. And disadvantages, it involves a larger number of people unsuitable for investigating uncommon disease. It's very difficult to conduct a study for a rare diseases. Okay, take a long time to complete the study and to obtain the results. Since it is a follow-up study, we need to spend more time. Administrative problems, loss of experienced staff, loss of funding extra is also loss of funding, no funding or minimal funding is also a problem in cohort study. Loss of substantial proportion of original cohort. Selection of comparison group is a limited factor. Difficult to introduce new diagnostic and other technologies in the study period. Suppose if you are going to conduct a study for a duration of 10 years, we cannot introduce a new diagnostic technique. Okay, since because our protocol is having an old one, so we cannot change that, and it is very expensive. Study may itself alert people's behavior. Ethical problems, just like an RCT, cohort studies also have enough ethical problems. Concentration will be on limited factors only. So these are the disadvantages and advantages of cohort study. These are the examples for cohort study. Darwin Hill study on smoking and lung cancer happened at 1951. Framingham Heart study 1948. Risk and benefits of oral contraceptives on health by Royal College of General Practitioners in England 1974. Okay. So this is regarding cohort study. Next class we'll be seeing about randomized control trial, that is experimental epidemiology. Okay, so in short, cohort study is nothing but a group of people who shares a common characteristics or experience. And what are the steps in cohort study? Selection of study subjects from the general population or specific group, selected group or exposed group, obtaining data on exposure. It can be done by interviews or questionnaires, review of record, medical examinations, or by experimental surveys. The selection of comparison groups, internal comparison, external comparison, comparison with the general rates. Follow-up analysis. By doing analysis, we can able to find out incidence as well as the estimation of risk. Okay, what are the types of cohort study? Prospective, retrospective, and combination of prospective and retrospective cohort study. And what are the indications? And there is a good evidence. Evidence of causative factor as well as the outcomes when the exposure is rare, but the disease among exposed is more. And when we can able to cut short the attritional problems and we have a ample of fund. So these are the indications and these are the types and these are the steps of conducting a watch study. Right? Any doubt? So we'll see about RCT and experimental epidemiology study decisions in next classes. Okay. Thank you.